Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
This is Nashville. I'm Nina Cardona, sitting in for your host, Khalil Ekulona. Years ago, when my husband was teaching middle school, the principal came to him with a problem. The way the schedule was working out, some of the kids Chuck had for Spanish would need to come back to him for another special subject. So, was there anything else he could teach? His solution was a crash course in practical money skills like budgeting, balancing a checking account, and understanding how credit cards work. He had a blast doing it, but only for a few years, and, well, who knows if anyone is still teaching those kinds of lessons. And that's the thing, right? All too often, we're left on our own to suss out how to handle things related to money. Well, today we've got a Citizen Nashville episode with a panel of experts to answer your money questions. But first, Tennessee is now the first state in the country to restrict drag shows. The law goes into effect at the start of next month. WPLN's Mariana Bacallao has been following the story and is here to talk more about the future of the state's drag scene. Thanks for being here, Mariana.
Thanks for having me.
And welcome back to This is Nashville. So people tend to call this law a drag show ban, but there is some nuance to it. What kind of drag is not allowed under the law?
Yeah. The law specifies that drag isn't allowed anywhere a minor might see it. So that's essentially any drag in public, think outdoor performances, parades, or drag queen story hour events. That's where drag performers sometimes dress up as fairy tale characters and read books to kids. All of that now exists in this legal gray area because one of the only ways you can guarantee a minor won't see a performance if it's at an indoor club. So advocates fear that this will force Tennessee's drag scene underground.
Okay, you call it a gray area, but where does that uncertainty come from?
Well, a lot of people in the LGBTQ community are worried about the subjectivity of this law. The word drag isn't actually in the bill. Instead, it calls these shows adult cabaret, which doesn't really apply to most drag shows. It also specifies no nudity, sexual conduct, or excess violence. Drag shows don't really have any of that explicit content, which is already covered by pre-existing obscenity laws. The legislation has been amended several times since it was first introduced, so it's not as overtly targeting drag. Kathy Sinback, head of the ACLU, says that she wants performers to know that drag is not actually illegal under this law.
But we also want them to know that there are people who want to enforce this illegally. And people have to make their own decisions about what they're comfortable doing when they know that there are forces out there that are hateful against them.
And if the law is enforced beyond those obscenity laws already on the books, the ACLU says it will bring a case against the state, but it has no plans to sue unless it's used to prosecute a drag queen or used to shut down a family-friendly LGBTQ event. But to Simback's point, drag performers are worried. No one wants to put themselves in that position where they could be prosecuted. A second offense would make it a felony, and that comes with disenfranchisement, and a lot of performers just aren't willing to lose the right to vote.
So it sounds like outdoor drag would be a clear violation of this new law. And that's going to be hard during Pride festivals, and that's coming up in June. How will this law affect those gatherings around the state?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Pride Month. New laws usually go into effect on July 1st, but this bill was quietly amended to take effect April 1st. So we will start seeing changes to Pride this year. Nashville Pride organizers tell me their event is still on. The main event usually is a concert anyway. I mean, it is Music City. So they say they're not sure right now what exactly will be different this Pride, but they don't see any big changes to its celebrations. But that's not the case for every Pride. Franklin is outright canceling its Pride, and other Pride festivals across the state have faced obstacles even before this law was signed. Several city governments have denied permits for Pride after Republican politicians began rallying against drag shows this past fall. Pride organizers in Knoxville previously threatened to cancel their festival if the ban passed, but they tell me that was more to bring awareness to the issue. They now say they will have a Pride festival, but it will likely be a march in protest rather than a parade. You know, the first Pride was a riot, and drag queens were instrumental in the fight for LGBTQ rights. So Knox Pride organizers say they're really returning to their roots and focusing on advocacy this Pride.
What's the economic impact?
Nashville's tourism could take a hit. I mean, drag brunches are very popular, and, you know, Music City's infamous fleet of party vehicles includes a drag queen-specific bus. Altogether, we're talking about millions of dollars in tax revenue for the state. Now, it's hard to say how much this industry will be affected since indoor bars should still be viable venues under the new law. But it does create an atmosphere of uncertainty for drag performers.
Well, then how are people reacting to that uncertainty?
There is also a fear that the broad language of the bill could open the door to criminalizing transgender people. The law refers to drag performers as, quote, male or female impersonators. Advocates worry that could apply to trans people just existing in public. It could also apply to trans and non-binary musicians who are just performing as themselves on stage. Our senior music writer, Julie Height, will be taking a more in-depth look at that next week. T-Pack could also be caught in the crosshairs. They have Hairspray and Mrs. Doubtfire on their lineup for the season, and both shows involve some form of cross-dressing. For now, it seems like T-Pack is not changing their season, and lawmakers don't seem too concerned with drag in these instances. LGBTQ advocates fear that cross-dressing as a joke for a straight audience will be safe, and once it crosses over into sincerity or is used as a genuine form of gender expression, it will be policed.
Well, Tennessee's ban on drag in public spaces goes into effect April 1st, and WPLN's Mariana Bacchiao will continue to follow that story as it plays out. You can look for those stories at WPLN.org. Thanks for being here, Mariana.
Thanks for having me.
We have to take a short break. When we come back, we're bringing you a Citizen Nashville all about personal finance. What questions do you have for our financial experts? Tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Nina Cardona, and this is Citizen Nashville. We've talked a lot here at WPLN News about how to serve you, our communities, better. So a few times a month, we're bringing you a special hour we're calling Citizen Nashville. Our goal is to answer your questions, round up resources for you, and make sure our leaders hear your needs loud and clear. Today, we're talking about personal finances. You know, an internet search for the term budget anxiety turns up more than 63 million results. But that's not really surprising, is it? I mean, when you think about what stresses people out, money is always near the top of the list. And it's so easy to get to the end of a pay period and wonder where it all went. So let's talk about it. What should we be thinking about when we set up a household budget? And how do you even get started? To help us answer those questions and set us up with some practical advice, I'm joined by Candace Harris, Vice President at Citizens Bank and an expert in financial literacy. And Samantha Tidwell is a diligent and detailed household budgeter. Thanks to you both for joining us, and welcome to This Is Nashville.
Thanks for having us.
Samantha, how did you get started with keeping such close track of your finances? Samantha, do we have you? You know what? We'll just, we're going to work on getting that connection with Samantha. So Candace, when someone is overwhelmed and confused and doesn't know where to start with managing their finances, what is that first step? What do you tell them?
So I think first step is take the shame out of it. That's number one, because money is so personal. So let's first say, hey, you're not alone. I like to pull up stats. And I like to also share my personal story. Hey, you're not alone. I'm in the business, and I also struggle with some of the same things that you struggle with. So that's number one. I would say number two is let's take a look at your habits. I always ask people, do you look at your statements every 30 days? They're like, no, I just spend. And when I get paid again, I just spend and do what I'm used to doing. However, when I go through line item by line item, we start to see some patterns. And if it's not in alignment with your goals, that's the number one way to say, okay, we found something that we can fix.
Samantha, how did you get started with keeping a really close track of your finances? What was that kind of trigger moment for you?
Yeah, so we had a planned job ending and an unplanned job ending suddenly in about a month or two after we bought a fixer-upper home. And we had to look at all of our bills and say, okay, which one should get paid this month? Because we didn't have a way to pay them. The concept of an emergency fund was not anything that we had been overtly taught. We were pretty much just getting a paycheck and, just like she was just explaining, spending it all on things.
Oh, did anybody talk to you when you were growing up about how to handle finances?
I know that my parents paid the IRS monthly until I was 18, and they told me, don't mess with the IRS. That was it. My husband had no overt education about finances.
Candace, how common is that to have people come in and say, I really don't know where I'm starting?
Oh, very common. It's the number one thing I hear all the time. And it's interesting that we go to institutions and colleges and get a great education to go work these jobs. But those same institutions aren't teaching us how to be adults and work the processes and work what we need to do to bridge generational, gaps and to reach whatever wealth goal we have. But we're taught how to go work the job, but not what to do to build.
So Samantha, where did you start?
Well, I got a few jobs. She just mentioned that, I have a master's degree. I had just graduated within 6 months. So I was willing to work all the jobs I could. So for a couple of years, I actually had 3 to 4 jobs at any given time, 1 full time, and then 2 to 3 part-time jobs. I was actually fortunate. I was able to work enough that I could pay the minimums on everything. And I learned real quick which companies you could call, including medical, and they will allow you to pay less on each bill until you can pay more, or will allow you to do a delayed payment based on your income. And our income was so awful that we always got approved for those when they were available at that time.
So it sounds like when this all kind of started out for you, Samantha, you had a clear priority in that you had bought this house, this fixer-upper, something needed to happen to keep, not just to keep a roof over your head, but make sure that roof wasn't, continuing to crumble and fall.
Yeah.
Candace, when somebody is starting in this situation, how important is it for them to find these priority things and kind of build around that?
So I always tell this story of going to the ATM, pulling out money, and then at the end of the day, week, or maybe in a couple of hours, wondering, what did I do with that money I just took out of the ATM? And so that is literally an example of what happens when you don't have a plan. And so I always say, be strategic about where you put your money, because if you don't assign it to a place, it will go. It'll just leave. It's not going to stay there. You'll always find something to spend on it. But your job pays you, but then you assign where it goes to reach the goals that you're trying to reach.
Money can cause a lot of stress and strain, especially in relationships. Samantha, when you found yourself in that tough situation, what were those conversations like with your husband?
So they were interesting. We, for lack of better words, randomly got married one day. And we had not talked about income. He did not know anything about my student loans, which are significant. And what the other guest is talking about, which is essentially a zero-based budget. We had no concept of that. So initially it was awful because we had to decide what things were not going to be, like what extras, like gym memberships, subscriptions, which ones are not going to be held on to, which ones are. And if it's mine, I want that, not him. And he feels the same way. And so it was pretty awful in the beginning.
Candace, what are some of the pitfalls that you see with couples when they're struggling to get on the same page about saving and spending? And
I think she pointed it out very well. Just not having the conversation, period. You're in love, But, money, I think there's a stat that says it can cause divorce at whatever year. I mean, it's the number one leading cause in divorces is finances in marriages. And I think another pitfall is not treating savings like an expense. We pay our bills because we have to. If you don't pay the lights, they're going to be turned off. You should treat reaching your goals the same way. So I don't treat my savings as an option. I treat it as an actual expense.
Everyone's situation, of course, is a little different. Everything's personal, but I'm curious, are there any kind of tried and true formulas that are kind of a starting point for having that conversation about here's where we're going to allocate the money?
I would say there's no tried and true way because everyone is different. I know what has worked for me. I know what has worked for some of the clients I've worked with. And one is going through your statements every month, because what I do is I lead you to see your own patterns. I don't tell you, you've done this, because that feels a lot like shame. I let you see your own ways. And then you're like, well, it's not that I don't have enough. It's I've spent in a wrong category. And then I think the other thing is a budget should not feel restrictive. It should feel more empowering. It should feel like I know where my money is going, so I know what I'm able and capable of doing. I know what goals I'm capable of achieving. So I really think it starts with mindset, and then whatever works for that person, whether that's a spreadsheet, whether it's the envelope system. There's several systems you can use. Discipline and mindset honestly comes first.
If you're just tuning in, this is Citizen Nashville, and I'm Nina Cardona, sitting in for your host, Khalil Ekulona. We're talking about budgets and getting a handle on your household finances. One thing that can be frustrating is that a budget is never going to be just set it and forget it, because the economy is always changing, and the situation in your own household is changing, and your household needs to evolve. Samantha, how have you been noticing the effects of inflation on your budget?
Well, so we've been budgeting at least weekly for the last 5 years. And so before we had our daughter, I know we were spending $500 a month on food and cleaning materials, house stuff. I mean, it started to creep up as we had a child and she started eating. And then in the last year, we are just we're having weekly conversations about how can we stop this? How can we get our grocery budget lower? I mean, we've made some pretty drastic changes, and that's been helpful. But it's just, I literally know exactly how much things cost last year or 2 years ago. And so the cost has gone up and makes it harder.
Candace, do you have any tips for adjusting to handle those kind of pressures and changes?
Yeah, I'm right there with Samantha. Buying in bulk, your Sam's and your Sam's memberships will definitely come into play, or wherever you buy in bulk. Frozen goods might be something you lean more into, but groceries has been the number one stressor for my customers as well.
So what do you tell them when they come in and say, I'm so stressed out about this? And is it also something where you need to look at kind of other parts of the budget and kind of rejigger some things?
Yeah, it's rarely a not enough issue. It's reallocating the priorities. So we got to eat. You have to go get groceries, and you have to put gas in your car to commute to your job. So maybe those subscriptions, taking a look at that. I mean, there's so many apps out there that will tell you, hey, you have X amount of subscriptions, prioritizing. Do you need that Netflix subscription? Do you need that gym subscription? So just really thinking, okay, priorities and readjusting.
Samantha, can you kind of walk me through kind of step by step how you think about those priorities, how you make your monthly budget?
Oh, we literally have a step by step. So yeah, I know exactly. Well, every Sunday, my husband and I sit down for an hour, right after breakfast, and we literally go through our weekly budget to make sure it's meeting our monthly goals. And just like she's explaining, that's what we've kind of figured out. We have 12 different savings categories. We have 12 different additional like checking accounts. And every month for our car fixing account, $50 goes in. Every month for the garbage fund, $20 goes in, because every quarter, $65 needs to get paid. So that's how we plan ahead for known expenses. Really, like the biggest thing that kills us is that, like, for example, we didn't have electricity for over 24 hours. So we had about $250 worth of food that we had to throw away on Saturday. And we were like, no, this is going to just mess everything up. And then my husband's like, wait, March is a 3 paycheck month for me. So, that's going to help us. But those like kinks, and like our house was not destroyed at all, but like we have some issues outside from the wind. And we're like, so we're like, do we call help, like our homeowner's insurance? Do we try to fix it ourselves? Like, what do we do? Is that going to be $5,000? Is it going to be $1,000? So those are the things that really kind of mess us up, is when there's these huge unexpected expenses over $1,000.
It sounds like, though, that having that appointment to sit down and talk is really key for you.
If we don't do that, it is without a doubt, we are going to overspend. I will go on Amazon. My daughter will need this thing. She will have to have it. But that happens like 3 or 4 times in the month. And so that really messes us up. Or my husband will want, a certain brand of something at the grocery store. And those like pre-made things, they get expensive. Even Oreos are like $5. I mean, that could be a $20 expense every month. That's a lot. So we really have to sit down to help each other to be accountable.
Candace, I'm seeing a lot of smiles and nods over here. What are you thinking as you hear Samantha say these things?
So that appointment is so necessary. Another step, too, that I do when I'm sitting down with my husband and going over our budget is a lot of people run from auto debit, and I totally get it. So if you are manually managing your money, having it chronologically listed out on when it comes out versus when your income actually hits, I call that a cash flow calendar. That could be a game changer, too, because week to week, your cash flow can be different. So if you're getting if you're getting your income on the 1st and the 15th, and you're more heavy on your expenses the first 2 weeks of the month versus the last, you are able to have a little flexibility in what you can pay for. You may not go to the grocery store that first 2 weeks and spend the larger amount. You might wait until your cash flow is a little bit better. So also looking at when things hit, when those expenses are due, can help you also better plan.
Now, both of you have touched a little bit on saving. Candace, how important is it to prioritize saving even as that cost of living keeps rising?
It's not an option. You have to do it. And I know people will say, well, savings aren't really... The interest rates are like 0.01%. People rate shop, but then it's also good, even if you have your money set aside and it's not earning that much, just having it set aside, you're 10 steps ahead of a lot of folks. So it's really a non-negotiable.
What is your advice for not just making a savings plan, but sticking to it?
Great question. So make it to where it's not accessible. I think sometimes we fall into I'm going to put it aside. I'll have it and you can have it at the same bank if you're disciplined enough. But I usually say put it somewhere where it's not as easy for you to do the transfer. I call it the transfer, where it's like, oh, I'm just going to take this out and I'll put it back, and we never put it back. I think the best way is to have it come out of your direct deposit. So set it up with your employer. Don't rely on yourself. Let it go directly from how you get paid straight into that savings vehicle, and out of sight, out of mind.
Samantha, you mentioned you've got, what is it, a dozen kind of pots that you're putting into for savings. What has worked for you to make sure that you hold to that and that you really, save the way you mean to?
Yeah. We have each one is named. We have, like she was saying, you have to save. When we did not have an emergency fund, when I say that we had $3,500 emergencies constantly, I mean, it's insane, to even think of the things that happened while I was pregnant. How can everything break at one time? But so once we had our daughter, we had paid off our debt, we were like, the only thing we cared about was having an emergency fund, because we had both experienced not having a job and not knowing how to pay for things. And now we had another human to care for. So we were like, this has to happen. Once we have a 6-month emergency fund. It was the most exciting thing ever. And now, like, even though, yes, having that random cash in an Ally account doesn't do a lot, but we make $100 a month from just that, because from the interest. And so that's amazing, because 6 years ago, we weren't even saving $100 a month for anything. So, that's been huge for us.
When people are having a hard time looking at the bills and then saying, yeah, but I do also need to save. Like, Candace, what do you tell people about how to approach those kind of trade-offs that have to kind of be made, at least emotional and mental trade-offs in those moments?
I think it depends on how bad do you want it sometimes. I mean, and knowing yourself and being honest with yourself. For me, I know I'm going to go out to eat, even after I've gone grocery shopping. But my goals have changed now. I mean, I had a baby during the pandemic. And I was laid off as well. Like Samantha said, that'll change you and jolt you in a minute, where you're like, I never want to feel this vulnerable ever again without that safety net. I think the best way is to be honest with yourself. I have nothing to prove other than I know I have a goal to reach, and by any means, I want to make sure I get it done. So if I'm honest with myself, I'm not disciplined. So if I know I'm not disciplined, what can I set up to get around that? And like I said, what I've done is my savings comes directly out of my direct deposit. My employer, I've set it up through my employer system, and I never see it, because if you're depending on me to actually do it, it's either going to get done and I'm going to go back and dip in it. So the best way is to take the shame out of it and say, hey, I know this is my pitfall, so this is what I'm going to do to get around it. And at some point, if I exercise this muscle enough, I'll get better.
Sounds like it's coming down to honesty about yourself.
Absolutely.
Samantha, when you're paying off the bills and those moments come and you're tempted to maybe take some time off from saving or cut down on how much you set aside, what do you tell yourself? What works for you to say, no, I'm going to hold the line?
Well, we always have some kind of goal. We were saving for a new kitchen. We have a 100-year-old house, so we had an original kitchen. It was awful. So we saved for 2 years, we refinanced, and we finally were able to get a new kitchen. And now we're like, okay, we got that. Now what? We were able to start having a gym membership again, like every month. And so that has really helped the two of us, because it was something that we always loved having, but it didn't financially make sense because we had other debt that we needed to pay. So now we're like, oh, we're finally back at the gym. We have a new kitchen, and so now we're like, oh, well, both of us could use new phones. So let's start saving for that. So we went through how much can we save? We can save $20 to $30. So that's what we're doing. We have a goal, and, so that's like how we go about things. Like for us, restaurants, not a huge deal. So that's a very small amount that we save every month, because we'd rather just cook and kind of hang out at home.
Well, that was diligent home budgeter Samantha Tidwell. Thank you so much for being here. Candace Harris will stick with us through the break. When we come back, the experts answer your financial questions about everything from retirement planning to teaching kids about money. And it's not too late to ask your question. Tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is Citizen Nashville. So much of financial planning is about being ready for the unknown, setting aside money just in case there's a costly accident, or estimating how much you'll need to live on after you retire. But the ins and outs of things like budgeting and saving don't have to be a mystery. We've got experts on hand to answer your questions, and if you've got something you'd like to ask, let us know. Tweet us at This Is Nashville. I'd like to introduce my next guests. Bill Parker is director of the Tennessee Financial Literacy Commission, and Erin Akery is senior manager of United Way's Financial Empowerment Center. Thank you both for being here, and welcome to This Is Nashville.
Thanks for having me.
Erin, what kind of services do the Financial Empowerment Center offer?
So we offer no-cost, one-on-one financial counseling for anyone who lives or works in Davidson County. Financial counseling essentially entails working on all things related to personal finance. We do a lot of credit counseling, a lot of budgeting work, cash flow work, money management. We help people build their savings, reduce their debt, etc.
Bill, the Financial Literacy Commission works all over the state. What kind of challenges do people share with you?
That's right, Nina. And, our primary focus is on trying to find ways to get financial literacy education incorporated in the school systems throughout the state. So our focus is primarily on the K through 8 space and finding ways to incorporate it in, school-based outlets, the classroom, before and after school programs, et cetera. And really, the number one thing we hear is, why isn't there more of this taught in the schools? Many people ask, or just let us know this wasn't available when I was in school. So, primarily it's just a matter of finding ways to get it in front of more students across the state.
All right. Well, let's dig into these questions. If you've ever eaten at the farmer's market in Nashville, Kiana Stone is one of the people who keeps it so nice and clean. But she has said that due to inflation, coming up with a balanced budget has felt impossible.
But because of the prices of gas, the prices of food, the health insurance, I have no budgeting plan. It's more like a survival plan. But again, I have no budgeted plan. I'm what the old people say, robbing Peter to pay Paul. So at this point, that's why I'm at.
Erin, what resources are available to help Kiana?
Well, I think, if she were to meet with a counselor, we would probably want to dig through her financial situation with a fine-tooth comb and see if there are places where she could access potentially a supportive service. She might be able to look into some kind of assistance depending on her situation. But there are also ways to generate income or increase income that she may not be aware of. There are things that might be coming out of her paycheck that we could look at with her and figure out if maybe she's paying in too much, or maybe she has excess insurances that we could cancel. There's a lot of things that we like to look at and kind of nitpick when it comes to personal finance. So that's something I would encourage her to do.
Candace Harris from Citizens Bank is still with us. Candace, what would you tell Kiana?
I think sometimes people feel like they're on a hamster wheel, and it may be easier just to stay on there instead of having to dig in, because digging in actually, it takes a lot of work. And so just like when you go to the gym, having a trainer helps you be accountable. And I think, just like Samantha said, like having someone say, hey, let me hold your hand. Let me show you this is what we can do. These are your options. Having that piece of accountability will help her understand you actually have more options than you think. So it's not necessarily a situation where she can't actually come out of it.
I mean, it sounds like there's a real emotional component too to be ready to face things head on. I mean, how do you help people just kind of take that first mental step of going, okay, no, I really am going to lay it all out?
Well, we do call it financial counseling for a reason. So there is a lot of talk about the family situation you might have grown up in, how you were taught to handle money or not handle money, and really just digging into past behaviors and working through why certain habits exist can help people to develop new ones, just to kind of see, there is a different way and there is a reason why you're making these decisions, and maybe we can look into exploring other ones.
Money can be kind of a taboo topic as well, which means that not everyone's talking about planning a budget around the dinner table. Nick Cheres wants to know more about how young people are being taught about the subject.
About preparing maybe the future and today's generation and tomorrow's generation for their future, like in regards to investments and how to invest and how to save your money and, that kind of stuff. Like, I think that we don't teach that, and maybe that should be implemented at some point.
Okay, Bill, I know this is a topic you are passionate about. How important is it for kids to understand how money works?
Absolutely. And it's extremely important. And the research, there's been some research out that shows out of the University of Cambridge that suggests that many of our habits and attitudes around money are set by age 7. So things like planning ahead or budgeting or delaying gratification, all of these things are habits and attitudes that we develop in childhood that we in turn carry into our adult lives. So it's important that, we as parents, begin intentionally having conversations around financial education or our family finances, but also, not every parent has been properly equipped to be able to discuss these things. Maybe they don't feel comfortable or competent to be able to share. Maybe they feel, as Candace has mentioned, a bit of shame about how they've kind of operated their finances in the past. And so, as you mentioned, it becomes a bit of a taboo topic.
Well, you're saying age 7. I mean, that's so young. What is it that you can go ahead and what is the important thing to be instilling at that age, 5, 6, before you get to age 7?
Yeah, so, there's some information out by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that talks about the building blocks of financial capability, and it references executive function, financial habits and norms, financial knowledge and decision making. All of these things kind of begin at an early age. So, for example, with executive function, this is the ability to plan ahead or focus attention, remember information, and also financial habits and norms begin early on in developing these sort of rules of thumb to live by. But essentially, the most important thing is just to be able to mention these things, to open up lines of communication, so that as students are watching or children are watching and learning from the behaviors of their parents or their caregivers or their media, social media, and peers, that they're able to sort of understand that there are right ways to go about making these decisions if you have the proper information.
So what kind of educational resources does the commission offer for kids?
Yeah, so we have a suite of resources that we've curated to make available to all schools throughout the state. And we spent careful attention in working with educators and school districts to understand what barriers prevent financial literacy from becoming a more important topic to cover. And so we have programs such as a classroom behavioral management system that we sponsor across the state that has students in classrooms, working, they have jobs in the classroom, and with those jobs, they get sort of monopoly money type of a paycheck associated with that. So it's developing financial responsibility. And then there's also a behavioral management component where teachers can offer bonuses and fines based on how they want to reward positive behavior or preclude some of that negative classroom behaviors, classroom rules and things like that. We also have digital financial literacy platforms that we make available at no cost across the state. And we do professional development, all the time for teachers to help them learn about our resources and how to best implement them, given their limited time in the classroom. And we partner with some other great agencies like the Tennessee State Museum. We've created a financial literacy traveling trunk that's really innovative and well received across the state. And also a partnership with UT Extension for Money Week, which has schools designating a full week to learning about personal finances through reading children's literature books. And then the teachers then conduct money lessons around the themes of these books. So it's really innovative And these programs are, again, designed to be available for teachers regardless of the amount of time that they have with the students, and really, without regard to their level of expertise. They don't have to be an expert. They don't have to have a certified financial planner designation to be able to teach and sprinkle in these important topics in the classroom.
Well, speaking of kids, balancing a budget can be especially challenging for parents like Soraya Douglas.
My question would be how to balance planning for the future, but also, living, for lack of better words, your best life now. How do you just balance out planning for the future, making sure you have enough in retirement and savings for kids and big purchases, and then also living your having entertainment in the current, present moment. Yeah.
Candace, what would you say to her?
So I smiled when I heard that question because I literally rewarded myself with Beyonce tickets. I was going to go to this concert, but I was only going to do so after I did what I had to do financially for my family and for my budgeting. And so I knew that's something that I wanted. So I geared up and I got ready for it. I made sure that I wasn't taking from my savings. I made sure that I budgeted down to where, okay, I put this X amount of dollars in savings. This is what I have to put towards these tickets so that I can go. I don't want to take away from another category because that goal doesn't go away just because Beyonce is coming in town, even though some people may disagree with that. But it was a priority, but only a reward after focusing on my goals. And so I would always say, still align it with, okay, I'm going to live my best life. It's interesting because Samantha and I was talking about how we live in a culture of right now. We see it on Instagram. Everything is luxurious. And of course, we only show the best parts. We don't show how we got it. We don't show if it's debt. And so because we're in that type of culture, I feel that sometimes we are rushed into, I got to have it now, versus let me plan for getting it when I can afford it and actually enjoy it without feeling the regret of purchase. I call it purchasing regret.
Erin, how do you talk to folks when they bring up that issue like Soraya did?
Yeah, a lot of our clients wonder, why am I working so hard? I don't feel like I can enjoy my paychecks. I'm not living my, quote, best life now. And there are some harsh realities around that phrase because this might not be the time in life where you can really live it up. This may be the time where you're cinching your belts a bit, where you've got young kids maybe in daycare, you've got a mortgage and rent. There are certain stages in our lives where you have a lot of things pulling on your income, and that might not be the time where you're going to do a lot of splurging on items and Beyonce tickets and things like that aren't necessary. And I think keeping top of mind that retirement and your future, like Candace said earlier, that is a necessity, just like paying your mortgage is. But some of those other expenses that are entertainment-based really are not needs necessarily. So it's really important that we just have perspective about where we're at in our lives right now and how it's not always going to be this way.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm Nina Cardona, sitting in for your host, Khalil Ekulona. This hour is a Citizen Nashville episode, answering your questions about personal finances. Next, Ernest Boy has a question about how to plan for retirement.
I'm a school teacher, so as a state employee, I have my retirement fund through the state plus a 401k. Is there a better way for me to invest my money, or should I just leave it where it's at so it will mature until I retire?
Erin?
Great question. Well, I have to preface by saying I'm not a licensed investment advisor. However, I am a big fan of a Roth option. So if you have a Roth option at work, I'm almost always, I would say 90% of the time, going to recommend that you use that. If not, I'm a proponent of opening a Roth IRA, just an individual retirement account outside of anything that your work is sponsoring. And the great thing about Roth is that your dollars grow tax-free. There will never be a tax on the money that you take out of a Roth IRA. So it's a very powerful retirement planning tool.
For any of us, how can we know if we are setting aside enough for retirement? I mean, is there any kind of rule of thumb to keep in mind?
Well, like Aaron said, I that is not my expertise. However, I personally have a personal financial advisor with Edward Jones, and she's like, "Hey, what age do you want to retire?" And she puts it in her, system, and we create my goal based off of the year that I say, hey, this is the age that I would like to retire. And then we work backwards and say, okay, well, this is how much you have to save. So I would just say work with someone in that field, let them know what your goals are, and then they can help you prep.
I know we talked about this a little bit earlier in the show, but, how do you approach things with a client, Aaron, when it comes to first setting down and making that budget and figuring out, like, how much am I thinking about retirement right now and how much am I thinking about these bills of the moment?
Yeah, so the first thing that I really try to encourage folks that are living pretty close to the edge, that may not have a whole lot of flexibility, I encourage them to look at their workplace plan. If you are offered a match at work on your contributions, you should do your best to maximize the match, because it's not really free money. It's money that you're working for. It's part of your salary, and you're not getting it unless you put in money as well. So that's a big thing that I encourage people to do to maximize your retirement savings. If you feel like you just can't save, at all, you can afford a few bucks. If your employer matches that, then you're really on your way. So that's kind of the first step. If you just feel like you cannot save, see if your employer will match your dollars and try to put in $10-20 every payday.
Our next question is from Carrie Sloan, and it's about tax season, which is just around the corner.
How can you save me money on my taxes without going to jail?
Now, Mr. Sloan wanted us to clarify, he's a retired CPA. He was joking about the whole going to jail thing, but what kind of resources are available for Middle Tennesseans trying to get their taxes done?
Well, I'll say United Way runs a VITA program, which stands for Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. And they have IRS trained and certified volunteers who can file income tax returns for free for any household that makes under $77,000. So there are lots of different VITA sites in Nashville. There are sites in surrounding counties where you can get your taxes done in person. There's also an online option. If you go to United Way's VITA website, you can enter all of your information and do your taxes online. So that's a great free resource for everyone in Nashville and surrounding.
We got a tweet from Mendy Boyd who asks, quote, I just recently learned that Tennessee is #1 in the nation for personal bankruptcy filings, and this is concerning. Another stat is that 1 in 3 adults in Tennessee have outstanding medical bills. It feels impossible to get ahead here. Is anyone addressing these issues? Candace?
So I can speak to, the medical piece I can't necessarily speak to, but the other part I can. So I think people automatically go to bankruptcy because they don't know about debt resolution, or calling your credit card billing company and saying, hey, I'm going through a hardship. That goes back to pride or shame or not feeling like, they'll listen to me. And so calling the creditor and saying, hey, I'm going through a hardship. What do you offer for that? A lot of times they'll have zero interest for a certain amount of time and allow you to catch up. The other piece is, instead of going directly to bankruptcy, you can actually ask debt resolution companies to negotiate on your behalf, to negotiate that debt down. So I would say those are two very good options.
We have touched on a lot of areas, and folks might feel like they are full of concepts to just kind of juggle and keep straight. So for all of you, I'd like to know if you could leave our listeners with one piece of advice, what would it be? Bill?
Yeah, so, as the director of the Tennessee Financial Literacy Commission, running a 501c3 nonprofit, one of the best things that we're looking for is advocates who can reach out to their local schools about adding in some financial literacy outreach capabilities, and also, supporting financial education for youth who are going to be the next generation of parents in Tennessee with financial support.
Aaron, what's that kind of nugget that you would tell folks to keep in mind?
I guess what I would say is just to start talking about your situation. A lot of people live in just shame and silence about their finances, and that really makes the situation worse. So start talking to family and friends. If you're not comfortable with that, come to talk to a financial counselor at the FEC and just start sorting through.
Well, we've been talking this hour to Candace Harris, who's a vice president at Citizens Bank. Bill Parker directs the Tennessee Financial Literacy Commission, and Aaron Akery is senior manager of United Way's Financial Empowerment Center. Thanks, all of you, again, for being with us today.
Thanks so
for
much.
having us.
We want to thank everyone who tuned in this hour. Tomorrow, we're inviting community members to share their concerns about the $2.1 billion plan to build a new stadium for the Titans. This is Nashville is a production of WPLN News and Nashville Public Radio. Listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Our producers are Steve Harush, Rose Gilbert, and Magnolia McKay. Our digital lead is Anna Gallegos-Cannon. Michaela Elias is our technical director. Our executive producer is Andrea Tudhope. The masterminds behind our theme music are LaRange and Namir Blade. Special thanks to Jeff Magruder. The conversation doesn't end here. Tweet us at This Is Nashville. Find us on Instagram and tell us what you want from our show by filling out our quick survey online. This is Nashville. I'm Nina Cardona. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody.